Don Bluth! Again. Obviously, I've talked about his first animated film before, The Secret of Nim, and how freaking epic it was. And it overall kickstarted Don Bluth's legacy, and after the release of that movie, things started to heat up. An American Tail, The Land Before Time, All Dogs Go to Heaven, the 80s was pretty much when Don Bluth was at his peak, but once we get into the early and mid 90s, that's when things starts to go downhill. Not only that the quality of these movies have declined, they also became box office bombs. Rockadoodle, Thumbelina, A Troll in Central Park, which, I gotta ask, who wanted this? And finally, penguins! The Pebble and the Penguin have fun using Tinder because these penguins use stones to marry someone. This musical comedy film is Don Bluth's 8th animated feature and considered as one of the worst films Don Bluth has ever made. Production began in November 1991 with a working title of the film being called A Penguin Story. Though Bluth production was based in Dublin, artists from Ireland, England, and Hungary worked on the project, with at least 7 directing animators working on the film. During a late stage in production, MGM insisted numerous changes to be made to the film, such as removing some characters, trimming down some sequences, scenes being cut from the final product, and having voices being re-recorded. As a result, the animation fell behind. Don Bluth and Gary Goldman were so dissatisfied with the changes MGM was insisting that they left during production. The film was originally slated for release in summer 1994, but due to some production difficulties, the film's release date was changed to April 12, 1995, and it suffered the same fate as the others. Negative reviews, box office bomb, pretty much what you expected. And you know what's crazy is that this is the first Don Bluth film I've ever seen. And I thought this was a fun movie when I was a kid, but watching it now it's pretty obvious that the magic has vanished. But I sure do want to talk about Don Bluth, so I can talk about it, but I'm not going to enjoy it. The movie follows the story of a timid, stuttering penguin named Hubie, who tries to impress a beautiful penguin Marina by giving her a pebble that fell from the sky and keep her from the clutches of an evil penguin named Drake, who wants Marina for himself. While it's kinda cool that the movie is based on the mating rituals of the Adelie penguins, it still felt plain and boring. Mostly because the plot feels cheesy. The main protagonist tries to save a beautiful girl from a villain. I've seen this so many times at this point. Even if you change things up here and there, it's still gonna feel generic. But what's really the next best thing? Why, the pebble that fell from space, of course. What a game changer. And I know it's a cartoon and all, and I also know that Hubie is just a penguin, so I can't expect him to have any common sense. But the fact that he picks up the pebble literally seconds after crash landing honestly gives me vibes from Heavy Metal, which is pretty concerning. It lets Hubie see things through it. I guess that's kinda cool. And then there's Drake, certified lover boy, certified creep, and that's pretty much who he is, just a discount Gaston from Beauty and the Beast. He's just a lame villain. He has his own lair, which, to be honest, doesn't really do much because it's pretty much generic looking. I don't know, I'm just bored. Oh yeah, there's Rocco, Hubie's best friend, who's just pretty much discount Phil from Hercules, but more aggressive and determined, and he's also not a simp. I could give credit to that. Okay, I'm gonna keep it a buck with you. I could be watching The Land Before Time instead of this, but I have a job to do. Remember when MGM insisted those changes during production? They sure had a big impact when it came to animation, but let's talk about the good things. The penguins look okay, I'm fine with the clothes and the hair, at least there's variations. But I guess the biggest thing about the animation here is the use of computer animation, and it honestly looks good. But even with that, rotoscoping is still here, I think. But even with the good points here, there is one major flaw, and that is when the characters just freeze in place. And obviously that doesn't look good. Heck, there are some characters that just freeze for a long time, moves a little bit, but back to the original pose and freeze, and on top of that, it loops. What on earth was going on? Again, it's pretty obvious that the animation fell behind. But I noticed that the animation fell behind to a point It felt like an animated movie from the 80s. Now, how would I know this? Well, if you compare this movie to the other Don Bluth films from the past, it's mostly identical when it comes to the animation quality. Ignoring the use of computer animation, there is a slight improvement, but that's it. But once you compare this movie to the other animated films that released in 1995 like Balto, Pocahontas, and A Goofy Movie, that's when you notice a big difference. And I understand that not all animation studios are perfect, and this is just for my thoughts and views. Man, it's been a hot minute since I've talked about musicals, hasn't it? When it comes to musicals from Don Bluth, they're always hit or miss. In this case, it's an obvious miss. Now and Forever, the opening song. I guess it's just okay. Sometimes I wonder. I honestly don't know. Good Ship Misery, that's pretty mediocre. Don't Make Me Laugh, a mediocre villain song that I actually like. Don't worry, I have a therapist nearby to see what's wrong with me. Looks like I got me a friend. Looks like we got ourselves a generic song in our hands. Great. It's pretty obvious that the soundtrack isn't all that great, and I'm not giving away any kind of points here whatsoever, so let's just wrap it up. Boy, what a downer this was. Especially that this is one of those films that I loved watching as a kid, but felt resentment for as I grew up. Because by then, I already had a taste when it came to animated films, and obviously this wasn't cutting it. I mean, if it wasn't for those changes MGM insisted, two things would have happened. It would have been slightly better, or it could have been a whole lot worse. But either way, I would have the same opinions. At least with B-Movie, there were some moments that made me go, what? But I still liked it. But here, it's just garbage. But either way, the movie did introduce me to the world of Don Bluth, so I could give this movie that. But I honestly want to wrap this up, so The Pebble and the Penguin is just a generic animated film that rips off homework from other animated films. The animation was okay, despite one big flaw. Soundtrack is generic, and to cap it off, I'm giving MGM the finger because they've ruined this movie. Yup, truly disappointing. But at least in 1997, Don Bluth made a comeback with Anastasia, but messed it up again in 2000. At least he tried, so you might as well give him that. But for now, I'm gonna wrap off the year with Santa Claus, and this time, he depends on technology.